Welcome back. It's time to look at some of the burning economic issues at the domestic commodities market. And a research analyst at the financial derivatives company, Desola Sumoni, joins us now for that. Good morning, Desola.
Good morning, BC.
So the U.S. economy shrank by 4.8% in the first quarter of 2020. Of course, that's the sharpest fall since the 2008 global financial crisis. At the same time, over 26 million Americans have lost their jobs in the past 5 weeks. What are the implications of these grim figures, and what's your outlook for the second quarter?
Yeah, like you rightly said, BC, the U.S. economy recorded sharpest decline since 2008, since the global financial crisis in 2008. This was even worse than economists' forecast of a decline of about 4%, and mainly was dragged down by a sharp contraction in consumers in personal consumption. Personal consumption declined by about 7.6%, which was the sharpest since 1980. We also saw declines in transportation, in recreational services, in food and accommodation. So all these factors together, dragged Q1 GDP. But we're also seeing this all over the world. In China, we saw Q1 negative growth of about 6.8%. In France, we saw negative growth of about 5.8%. And in Spain, we saw negative growth of about 5.2%. So this just shows what is to come. But this is not even the worst, because the shutdown, only the lockdowns across countries around the world only started towards the end of March. So for April, for instance, we have full months of lockdown, and in many countries, the lockdown is still continuing. So we're expecting for Q2, sharper declines. In fact, some economists forecast that in the US, we might see GDP decline as low as negative 20%. What does all of this mean? For us in Nigeria, for Nigeria, the effect is going to come through remittances, because Nigeria depends on remittances for some foreign exchange, and because people are losing their jobs in the US, and Nigerians have about 300,000 Nigerians in the US currently, so we expect remittances to decline sharply as well.
That's certainly not good news. Of course, the U.S. Fed kept benchmark interest rates unchanged at 0 to 0.25% at the FOMC meeting yesterday, while giving a gloomier outlook for the medium term. Talk us through the implications of this move.
Well, there wasn't much the U.S. Fed could do, right? So before their meeting yesterday, they've cut interest rate twice to near zero. Like the range is now from 0 to 0.25%. They've increased quantitative easing, which is simply buying assets in order to increase liquidity into the system. They've established, credit lines for struggling businesses, and also swaps for central banks in foreign countries. So those are all the things they've done. But at this point, the conventional monetary policy is getting to its limits, and the central bank just paused to allow the measures they've taken to take effect. There was also fiscal stimulus of about $3 trillion US. So, but what happened immediately? The central bank announced that they're going to hold rates unchanged. Was that the dollar index, the dollar weakened against the basket of 6 currencies, and usually when this happens, we see more demand for oil, because it becomes cheaper for holders of foreign currencies to buy oil. But at this time, it's quite strange, because no one wants to buy oil right now because of literally no demand for it. So as a result, I'm not seeing that effect on our oil prices, and oil prices are still depressed.
Desola, we all know that the IMF has approved a $3.4 billion emergency fund for Nigeria, and that's the largest to any country for COVID-19 relief. How will this inflow affect the Nigerian economy?
I think it's important to note that it is not a grant. I mean, I've heard some people think it is a grant. It's not a grant, it's a loan, and the interest rate is about 1%, and it's payable between 3.25 to 5 years. But what does that mean for us in Nigeria? First of all, it is good. The the emergency funding is the IMF facility known as rapid financing instrument, which is essentially an instrument or a facility given to countries who are having balance of payments issues. Balance of payments issues simply means that our inflow of dollars into Nigeria is not enough to satisfy our expenditures abroad. And it's easy to see this because Nigeria depends heavily on oil for dollar inflow. In fact, oil accounts for about 90% of Nigeria's total exports. And since the crash in oil prices to just above $20, we've seen also export revenues take a serious beating. And that is why we are not enough there isn't enough US dollars in the country to meet some of our obligations. So what does it mean for us? Well, it means first of all our external reserves is going to receive a boost, which will further help the central bank to continue to defend the naira or to support the naira. It also, but it's not a what's the word now? It's not a silver bullet, right? It's this. The IMF has said that that these funds need to be managed transparently. So they've spoken about what's what an independent audit for how the money has been spent. So overall, I think it is positive. It's positive for investments, investors' confidence,
Well,
but it's not a silver bullet.
similarly,
It's not a silver.
yes, the National Assembly has also approved 850 billion naira supplementary budget. Now, do you think that this is sufficient to plug the gap in the budget?
It's not sufficient. I mean, ordinarily, before this COVID business, we had a deficit of about 2 trillion. Now, our projected revenue has taken a serious beating, which has, declined by about half. And so it's not enough, but it's a step in the right direction, right? So we're also expecting some funds from the World Bank and the African Development Bank. I think about 3.5 billion from them as well. So the interesting thing about this National Assembly, this 850 billion loan from the national that's the president has requested to borrow from the National Assembly is that initially it was supposed to be borrowed from the international capital market, but with the pandemic it has become unfavorable to do so, and so now they have to shift attention to the domestic market. Now this will bring total borrowing this year to about 1.6 trillion. And my concern is just that if the government is borrowing this much from the domestic market, it may crowd out private borrowing. But overall, I think it's a step in the right direction. And if it is used properly, it can help us in the fight against this coronavirus and to cushion some of the effects on the economy.
Now, the CBN has restored the check clearing system as well as selling FX to the market. How do you see this supporting economic activity and the exchange rate?
I think it is positive because even though young people, yes, I think it is positive, right? Because a lot of transactions go through the check clearing system. It would surprise you to know that monthly, about over 300 billion transactions are carried out via check, and annually is about 4.4 trillion. So it's a huge portion, and usually companies use this to pay staff salary and to pay vendors and stuff. So I think it's going to increase the velocity of circulation, which is essentially the speed at which money exchange hands in the economy. Now for the FX, I think it's positive because for I think about a month now, about 5 weeks, the central bank stopped intervening in the FX market, and that is part of the reasons why we saw the exchange rates depreciate to about 420 in the parallel market. But now that the central bank is returning to sell the US dollars in the market, I think it is positive. It may reduce some of the pressure on the exchange rates. But it's important to know that they are not selling to the BDCs yet. They are not selling to bureau de change yet. They are selling to SMEs who need to import important things that will help their production, and also for people who are paying salaries for their children abroad.
What would be the effect of the phase easing of the lockdown on commodity prices?
Okay, so first, I think it's taking away the panic buying. So before we saw a lot of panic buying, and that is majorly why we saw prices jump. So it's first of all, it's taking away that panic buy. So economic activity is going to gradually go back to normal. But also, because people will now be able to go back to work, go back to their farms, I think supply is also going to be increased. Production is going to increase, which is also going to reduce the prices. But overall, I don't think prices are going to reduce sharply, because we know that prices are sticky downwards, meaning that they are quick to increase, but very slow to come back down. So overall, I think that this the easing of the lockdown would have a positive effect on domestic prices, but it's not going to be immediate and it's not going to be sharp.
Thank you, Desola. Desola Simone is one of the research analysts at the Financial Derivatives Company. Do enjoy the rest of your day.